race week. So a lot of people get nervous in this week about what to do with training, what to do with volume. And that's probably the biggest thing, is we need to start tapering back some of that training volume from the heavy weeks that we've had. The one thing I always try and remind people in these weeks is that you're not going to get any better, but you can get worse if you push it too far. So numbers wise, what I'd recommend is probably reducing training volume by 40 to 50%, and then just starting to work on efficiency stuff, keep a little bit of strength stuff in there like we're doing today, and just remember not to try and be pushing things to absolute max and keeping a few things in reserve. So with these race weeks, the one thing that I think a lot of people get wrong is that although we're pulling training volume back, we still want to leave in some intensity. The reason for that being is we almost don't want our body to like start shutting down and go into like a holiday mode, or I think it's resting. We want it for it to feel ready, so when race day comes, bang, we're straight into it out the pens, and the body's just ready to fire. So that's why we keep some of the intensity in, but just a lot less of it, because we don't want that repetitive fatigue stuff kicking in. So it's going to allow us to work at race pace, to work on efficiency, and go through the things that we want to do on the day. Sims, some people I think do too many sims. I know some people have even put sims once a week in programming sometimes, and it's way too much on the body. I think in this prep for the next Hyrox, I think I've done one sim in like the last 14 weeks. I don't even know, to be honest, if we'll do another one. Everyone's obviously very individual, and this is the thing I set for clients as well, is that people are very different in their strengths and weaknesses, and what one person will need for taper week might differ from someone else. So just take things with a pinch of salt as well. So we're just gonna do some chins as well. Do love doing chin ups. One of those movements is like a guilty pleasure, which I struggle with because of my body weight, but we do our best. I think the other thing that I did, mistakes I probably made in the previous event, really brought calories too far down. I'm going to speak about nutrition a little bit later in the vid, but I got injured quite a lot just from being malnutrition and training being high, I think. So that's one of the things I definitely want to cut out in this taper week, as well as probably just reducing any movements that are super high risk or high metabolic fatigue, because we want to be nice and ready to go. Not of any high risk in this last week. Even though body weight's come down, definitely dropped a little bit of strength, but that's just because from training or weight training 4 or 5 times per week, and now doing it 1 to 2 per week. But that's not the point of being like a Hyrox athlete, which I'm trying to dial into at the moment. It doesn't entail you to do that much strength, especially with my background strength. So it's just a case of sucking up and being a little bitch for a little bit. So the other thing is to remember in this week, just fuck your step count. I think people get too caught up with step count, especially coming from general fitness stuff. The main focus of this week has got to be sleep, recovery, rest. Like I said before, you're not getting any better, but you can get worse if you overdo stuff. Let the body rest, like let the body just sort of recuperate and let it just flush with glycogen again, ready for the weekend. So keep your feet up, especially a couple of days before, and don't worry about roaming around and walking around this week. The last thing to do, and this is kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak, so you don't have to do it, but for example, if you know you've got a race coming up and you may be racing later on the day and you used to train early in the morning, try in your taper week, do some of the sessions at the time that you think you might be racing, because that will help just with the body and get into a normal rhythm. Lastly, the final day of a taper, I like to do a session which is like about efficiency, high intensity, low volume. If you're still unsure about what to do for a taper week, what I'm going to do is leave a link below and you can join my email list that I just send free shit out to. What I'm going to do next week is I'm going to send out what my taper week, or what a sort of universal taper week might look like, so you can stick to it if you've got an event coming up. So hit the link, jump on that, and you'll have it in your inbox. So I just want to speak to you about taper week nutrition, which is where I think a lot of people come unstuck, mainly because they bring calories down lower than where they need to be. So we don't really, depend on the individual, need to bring calories up or bring calories down. That's because in this training week, like we've just been through, volume is going to come down. So naturally you're going to be expending less energy, which means that your sort of caloric energy balance is going to be changed, because you're now expending less but consuming the same amount. So it might put you around maintenance or a slight surplus, depending on what you've been consuming at the moment. We do not eat less in taper week. And one other thing I'd say around
carbohydrates. I said for most people, myself, total calorie intake around 60 to 65% of carbs. Don't need a ton of protein, especially kind of the days leading up to the actual event. So I'll always keep things in my bag like banana out of nowhere. I've random bagels in my backpack and shit like that, just so I can get some good carbs in. So the one thing on the taper week, and especially day before, is don't change carb intake. Don't go from having like bananas and bagels to having donuts and, I don't know, fucking pizza. Just try and, if you are increasing the calorie intake or changing the carb intake to like 60 to 65% of what I've just said, try and just increase the total volume of the normal food you're having. So if you used to have bagels, have two. Got 2 bananas, just increase the carb intake you're currently having, because the worst thing that you can do is start changing foods in and out. You start shitting through the eye of a needle, and then you get digestive issues and you can't race. Or the day of the race, you start putting in weird and wonderful things and your stomach starts gargling and you get that weird runny stomach. So keep the food that you're having the same all the way through the week. The other thing I'd say is just plan and work back from the race. Decide how many days, how you're gonna start carbing up. I just do the day before and the morning of, just because it's an hour to an hour and a half event. It's not like a marathon where you need shit ton of carbs, but it is useful to get them in, decide where when you need them, just the glycogen stores as full as possible. Like we said, we don't want to be in a deficit, because one of the things I've learned from mistakes in the past before is that at the end of the day, it's not about running around with a beach body and abs. It's about coming out with the best time that you can and being happy on the day with the time that comes up on that big scoreboard at the end of the Hyrox event. Now there's a couple more tips and tricks I just want to finish off on for taper week that you can take into consideration depending on what race you're doing. If you've got a doubles race and you know who the strong athlete is, or probably stronger runner, try and make a little bit of a game plan. So if you go in some of the ergs and stations, if you've got a runner who's a lot better, having them start and finish the stations is going to allow you, if you're the weaker runner, to be fresher for the runs, and you're going to be able to run at a quicker pace. So having a bit of a game plan or strategy around some of the stations will help with that kind of thing, but you've also kind of planned for everything not going to plan. And what I mean by that is certain people might get fatigued, more tired than what you think, and that's where communication is going to be important if you're doing a doubles race, in making sure that you guys know how effed up you are and where someone might need to change in and out, especially with those transitions on certain parts or certain stations. And I'd say the last 2 things that are important, you probably can't really see it here, but I'm not in race gear, but it would be to practice in race gear. So if you bought a new pair of shoes, don't just slide them on before the race and think, oh, these are gonna be great, because you come out with feet like roasted chicken. You want to be able to train for a little bit in those bits of kit, in those shorts, in that vest that you're gonna wear, in those shoes that you're gonna wear. So practice for a couple of sessions in those, and then very lastly, just something to consider, the warm-up that you're gonna do. 2 main things: don't absolutely gas yourself for it, and don't do not enough. So making sure you're doing some of your mobility work, activation stuff, stretching, but then most importantly, getting your heart rate up before you go into the pen. You don't want to be going into the first run trying to get your heart rate spiked. You want to be nice and high from doing some race pace work on the eggs or doing some running. Then don't go into the pen any more than like 5 minutes before. You're just standing there in pure adrenaline, being drenched in it before you need to race. So hopefully those tips are helpful. If you've got any questions on taper week, drop them below and I will jump in and answer them on this video. And most of all, if you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe. I'll see you next one.